So we're just going to give you some data about past years for applying to emergency medicine. So what these numbers are telling you is that the average number of programs people will rank is 12. Your average step 1, step 2 scores are there. This is for everybody going into emergency medicine who matches. Obviously, everybody has a little bit of research experience. Most people have at least a few publications. Many people have at least a few different types of work experience, several more volunteer experiences. About 12% are AOA, and about 27.6 go from the top 40 med school. So just looking at these, basically, this is when it talks about the number of contiguous ranks, this is talking about when they're ranking just EM programs and they're not ranking, you know, EM and IM or EM and FM or EM plus another program. So essentially what we're showing you in this slide is that once you go above about 12 schools or programs that you are ranking, it doesn't really help you that much. People who are ranking 13 or more that did not match, and you can see it's kind of hard to see on this slide because most people do match, the percentage of not matching is that little teal color. You don't really see much of that in the upper numbers. And so what we're trying to get across to you guys is that we don't really think that it's worth it to rank more than the 12 programs. If somebody is ranking 13 or more and still doesn't match, there's probably some other issue with the application, and in which case ranking, you know, 20 programs is not necessarily going to help you any. This is just sort of the range of step scores for US senior medical students who went to an allopathic medical school. You can see the range of the step scores there for people who matched in blue and people who didn't match in the light green color. And again, so what these next several slides are going to show you guys is that there are several factors that go into applying to emergency medicine and how you get features that people have when they match into emergency medicine. What it's also telling you is that there's no magic one piece that's automatically going to get you matched. It's a sort of a conglomeration of all of the different aspects of your application. So if your score is one of those. So you can see that there are people with really high step scores who didn't match, and there are people with lower step scores who did match. Basically, most people are, if you're between the 200 and 240 range, most people are matching, but that means that they had something else going on for their application as well, because there are also people within that score range who do not match. Again, same as the slide before, just showing your step 2 scores rather than step 1. So the mean of those is going to be in the 240s.
And just one thing to point out, guys, notice everything kind of shifted to the right there. Step 2 tends to be more important for EM physicians and for EM programs. It's more reflective of what we do. I don't really care if you guys remember the Krebs cycle. Never going to need you to know that on shift. But the clinical stuff that's step 2 test is a lot more important to me. And that's true for most program directors in emergency medicine. So if you got a 210 on step 1, but a 240 on step 2, you're probably fine.
So this slide, again, just looking at research programs. So most people applying into EM and matching into EM have some sort of research project under their belt. But again, just doing research alone isn't going to guarantee you a match. As you can see that there's some people who did 5 or more research projects who still didn't match. So again, it's just one piece of the application. Same thing goes with publications. We love to see publications, but it's, again, not everything. It's not the one thing that's going to get you a spot. So most people have at least some number of publications.
But notice that 283 people with no publications matched perfectly fine into medicine. So do not stress about that.
Again, work experience, same sort of thing. Obviously, you see that most people are in the middle between 1 and 4 work experiences. A large group of people had 5 or more experiences, but again, there were 69 people who matched who had 0 work experience. So it's something that we do look at if you have it, but if you don't have it, it's not going to tear down your application.
And work experience probably is a little bit more important than research. Most of us don't want to be your first boss. So residency is hard. You're going to get negative feedback, like you're going to get corrected. That's like how we make sure you don't kill people when you're done. It's important. And we don't want to be the first one to ever do that to you because it's hard. It takes an adjustment to learn how to do that. Being a student is very different than being an employee. So work experience is really, really good. And we'll talk a little later about what to include on ERAS and what not to.
And again, same information for volunteer experiences. Volunteer experiences, we do appreciate. You can see that it's not very often that you see applications with 0 volunteer experience. Many people have several different types of volunteer experience. So it is something that we pay attention to. We do appreciate volunteer experiences that are for a longer time or more in-depth, rather than listing 20 things on an application where each one was only just a couple of hours each. And then looking at how competitive the EM match is. So basically this is showing you data that Stanford put together from 2011 to 2020. Essentially what it's showing you, if you look at the percent of EM positions filled by LCME US seniors, that's kind of how programs are looking at how competitive specialty is. And so you notice that the numbers were kind of going up until about 2017, and then they went down a little bit. So in the time that Dr. Tui and Dr. Ray and I all applied, it was definitely becoming more and more and more competitive. But in the last few years, it's become slightly less competitive. So it's not just increasing in competitiveness every year. It has gone down a little bit in the last few years.
And again, this isn't to like make DO or FMG applications feel like unimportant. This is just kind of what has always been. It's how surgery measures how competitive the specialty is. It's always been how many are filled by LCME, which are MD programs. So that percentage. But these numbers were also a little complicated by the fact that AOA programs or DO programs used to have their own specialty residencies, and that has gone away. Pretty much everyone is now ACGME certified. And I don't think anyone's quite sure how that's impacted these numbers, but that's probably part of why it's dropped, because now some of those EMD applicants are going to those programs that were classically DO and we couldn't go to. So no one's quite sure exactly how that's impacting this number, just FYI. And then this is just where that chart is from, guys. So this is the ALEM discussion with program directors about the 2020 match. So it's like a 45-minute podcast, pretty well done by ALEM and them, really geared towards students. So if you want more information about how the last year went, the gist is always the same. It's not that different. I swear it's not. You guys are going to drive yourself crazy thinking that it is. And I mean, this year is going to be different because of COVID. But like overall, the competitive specialty, I swear, it's been very similar for years. Most of the changes are related to students applying to more programs, and therefore like very, very top students taking up more interview spots because they're doing more interviews. But the specialty itself and overall where people match in the end is not that different. But it's an interesting podcast if you'd like to watch it. And there is a spreadsheet that I'm sure at some point you will discover. I'm not gonna tell you where it is because it's a crazy spreadsheet. You can get there from two places, Student Doctor Network or Reddit. It's an insane spreadsheet. I highly recommend you don't go there. Seriously, it's train wreck. And it's a bunch of students who don't know what's going on, leading other students who don't know what's going on. And that's not to be offensive to you guys. That's just like, literally, I go to it sometimes because it really is a train wreck and I like can't look away.
It's very anxiety provoking, I think, from a student's perspective. And I think in the end, what it does is it gives a lot of people more anxiety about the process than really is necessary.
Plus, you can't trust the information. So I go on there and there's just clearly wrong information that like someone who just wants to be a troll and screw with people is posting. And so every now and then I'll go and try to correct a few things because it just drives me nuts. But really, if you can avoid it, it's not going to improve your application. It's not going to help you. It's going to make you really, really anxious. So I would highly recommend not going to that spreadsheet. But I know most of you at some point will. And that spreadsheet is going to tell you that EM, this is the most competitive year ever in EM, and all these people aren't going to match. And then the stats come out, and it's not true. And that's been true for years, ever since those spreadsheets existed. So take it with a grain of salt if you're going to spend any time there at all, but I highly recommend you just avoid it. Talk to your advisors instead. All right, so let's review some typical application strategy stuff. It's not going to change that much this year. So your goal is to rank 12 programs. That is the magic number. 99.4% of people who rank 12 programs match. Those numbers don't go up at 13, 14, 15, like Sangeeta said. So there is one person who matched ranked 17 plus programs who didn't match. There was something wrong with that person's application, or they didn't apply to the right programs, or they had terrible interviews. I don't know which. But 20 was not going to make a difference for that person. So 12 is the magic number for almost everyone, with very rare exceptions. Apply broadly. So a lot of you are going to apply regionally, geographically. We know. You guys want to stay in your location, or you want to go to a specific location. We completely understand that. Now within that, you're going to kind of try to pick which programs to apply to. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but what you probably want to do is do a nice combination of some community, some academic, some county, and some newer programs. Because newer programs, I don't believe in tiers, we'll talk about it in a minute, but newer programs are going to be slightly less competitive, but at the same time, they may really only want people they really think are going to pick them because they don't want to go super down the list. So they might be more competitive than you think because of that. So it really varies by the program. It's hard to anticipate where you're going to fit well. So that's why I would recommend you apply broadly. You can get a feel for a lot of different programs, and maybe you will fit better in county than other. And so you're going to be more likely to match into a county program or vice versa, academic community. So disclaimer, the subsequent information varies greatly depending on where you live, where your school of medicine is, MDs versus DOs versus IMGs. So I am a program director at a Southern California program. So my students are MD students in a Southern California program. So the way I advise them might be slightly different than I would advise someone who's from Florida. That said, the general information is correct, but hopefully you guys all have an advisor who you can kind of run your exact numbers through. So the stuff on the residency tiers, just so I can cover it real quick because we talked about it. So students like to talk about reputation, but reputation is really vague, right? What is reputation? So the oldest programs are really well known. Everyone knows about Cook, everyone knows about USC. Great, but they're huge county programs that might not be for you. And that doesn't mean that you're going to get a better or worse job, whether you went to Cook or not. So EM is not a research heavy field. So you also can't count on, NIH ranks, NIH funding based ranks, because that has nothing to do with emergency medicine. Like just because Yale gets tons of NIH funding doesn't mean their EM residency is going to be phenomenal, right? There's a complete disconnect there, but some people tend to look at the top 40 med school rankings and to try to apply to residencies. It doesn't work very well. Larger programs are also always going to have more alumni, so you're more likely to have heard about the program. So that could be reputation, but I'm not sure that's going to translate to a place that you're going to be happy training or that you're going to necessarily get you a better job. Another thing that I've seen students try to measure reputation or these tiers is how many interviews that spots are offered. But my program only has 9 interview spots. I only interview 80 people, but someone who has to interview for 20 spots is probably going to interview 200 plus. I'm not sure that makes one program better than the other. The probably most realistic thing that would quote measure competitiveness would be the number of ranks per spot. So the number of ranks that I have to make to fill my spots. But this is information that we have as each program, but no one's ever going to make it public. It's never going to be a database where you can go look. I know my rank list and I know how far I went, but that's never going to be publicized, in part because I don't want my residents to know how far I went on the list versus the class before them. That's mean. My residents don't even know that. And in part because it varies year to year and it's still probably not an accurate measure. But that would probably be the most reliable measure, but it's not probably ever going to be anything that's available. So the things I would encourage you to look at instead of these mythical tiers are size of class. What do you think you're going to fit in? Do you want a class of 20 where there's always going to be someone you can hang out with because someone's off at the same time as you? Or do you want something smaller? If a larger class is probably also going to be a larger hospital, a larger overall volume. A smaller class, you're going to have a more close-knit family feeling, a little less likely to fall through the cracks. If there's only 9 residents, I'm less likely to miss that one is really struggling than someone who's got 27 residents. And then job placement, specifically job placement where you want to work. Okay, so Cook County, one of the oldest EM programs in the country, great program, but their residents are not going to have a leg up getting a job in Southern California, whereas my residents do, especially in Orange County, which is a very small market, but pretty much every hospital in the area is run by one of my alumni. So when they have a spot, they call me and they say, who should I hire? And I give them the best residents of the class. And so those are very small democratic groups, high paying jobs locally. I don't have those same connections in Tennessee. I'm sure if one of my residents wanted to go to Tennessee, they could get a job there, but we don't have those same connections. So a larger program is probably going to have more alumni spread out, but that job placement power will be slightly weaker because it's so spread out. So realistically, your best bet is to just pick something that regionally is where you think you want to end up. So if you want to end up in New York, you're probably best going to residency in New York, where you're going to rotate at those hospitals, get to know those people. If you want to work in Southern California, you're probably best trying to get into residency in Southern California. Okay? So here's just a couple of examples. So if you are the top of your class, you've got like 250 plus on all your steps, you're the top 10% of your class, you honored everything, you've researched in your specialty, your AOA, you've got great activities, you probably only need like 30 applications, 10 to 12 interviews, 10 to 12 ranks. You'll be fine. You're going to match somewhere, assuming you don't have a severe personality deficit and can't hold a conversation, which most people in EM don't have that problem, so I don't really worry about it. So slightly weaker, you still did great on your steps, but you only honored about half your specialty, your rotations. You got research in the specialty, you've got strong activities. Those people can probably do like 30 to 40 apps. Aim for your 12 interviews, maybe 1 or 2 more if there's a program that you're kind of not sure about, and 12 ranks. So we start coming down. So if you got like 240s, 1 or 2 honors, you still have strong research and activities, you're probably going to aim for somewhere between 40 and 50 applications, 12 interviews, 12 ranks. 230s, which you're starting to get like, you're right on the average of EM applicants. No honors or maybe 1 honor, but you've got good activities, which I feel like a lot of EM applicants do. We all have ADHD, we get bored easily. So most of us tend to do a million things in med school. 40 to 60 applications would be fine. Seriously, leaning on the 40, depending on the region you're looking at. 12 interviews, 12 ranks. Now, if you start getting where you're an average numbers person, you didn't honor anything, but you've got really weak research, you just never really did anything in med school, it's going to be a little harder on you because we kind of wonder what you did in med school. Like, what did you do with your free time? Like, what were you doing during med school? You didn't have any other activities. Do you multitask well? We worry about those things in EM. So at that point, I'd probably say 40 to 60 applications, maybe 12 to 17 interviews, still aiming for your 12 ranks. 220, pretty much the same thing. So as your step score starts going, but this person's got strong research and activities, 40 to 60 apps, 12 interviews, 12 ranks. If you take that same person and they've got weak research and activities, you need to up their application. So at that point, you're looking at like 50 to 70 applications, 12 to 17 interviews, and 12 ranks. When you start getting to borderline USMLE scores, 200s to 210s, but you've got good activities, you're still probably 50 to 70 applications, still only 12 to 17 interviews. If they want to interview you guys, they're interested enough to rank you. All right, so that's why the number of applications tends to go up on all these people, but the number of interviews stays fairly stagnant, except for the superstar who can do like 10 to 12. Everyone else, the answer is 12 to 17 interviews, because if they're going to interview you, they're going to rank you highly. And at that point, you're just trying to prove to them that you're a normal human being who's going to pass the 3 a.m. test. And so even this person can still do 12 ranks. If you have weak research and activities, we're going to up that number of applications to 70 to 90. So at this point, you're applying to almost all the EM programs in the country. If there's USMLE failure, it's going to go up even higher, 80 to 100 applications, 12 to 17 interviews, and 12 ranks. But if you're USMLE failure and you have weak research, weak activities, you probably still need to do 80 to 100. You may want to consider a backup specialty, and you probably need to talk to an advisor who knows you really well and your personality and things like that, because at that point, those start factoring in a lot, especially this year when we can't just send you to multiple ways to figure out where you fit in. So what do I mean when I say strong activities? So work experience is huge. We love work experience. On that, list all your work experience. If you were a barista when you were 16, list it. I want to know you had a job. There was a guy who was an underwater welder for 3 years, and then he was an engineer for a drag racing group, like one of the drivers. And he didn't list it as an application. The only reason I caught it is because he like briefly mentioned it in his personal statement. And I'm like, those are cool. Why wouldn't you list those? He's like, they didn't seem ELIM related. I'm like, I don't care. You welded underwater. You're going to do really well under stress. I want you. So waitressing, like that is directly applicable to emergency medicine. You have to keep people happy, figure out what they want, manage a bunch of tasks at the same time. If you were a wait staff person, I want to know. So go ahead, Lisa.
I was just going to say, along those same lines, longitudinal things that you have done for a really long time are also really, really nice to see.
Agreed. Yeah. Research in the specialty, but also research outside of specialty helps, and then any community service in med school. So let's get to what you should list. Work experience anytime, like I just said, like anything. If you had a job and it paid, you should list it. Research, basically anything. You can list your undergraduate research. It's not going to matter as much as your med school research, but you should totally tell us about pipetting in med school or in undergrad. Community service in med school is really important. Groups you joined, interest groups you joined, even if they're not EM, you did something, especially if you had a leadership role. So even if you were the co-president of surgery interest group, I want to know, leadership is important. Most other undergraduate activities do not need to be listed. So I don't need to know that you were president of your pre-med fraternity. Like that's not really going to impress us. There are some exceptions. If you got the level of Eagle Scouts and Boy Scouts, we like to see that. If you were an NCAA athlete, we like to see that. If it was something really longitudinal, like Elisa said, so Elisa raised guide dogs her entire childhood, from high school through college and all the way into med school. So she listed that. So things like that, really, really longitudinal. If you started a charity that makes $1 million a year in undergrad, yeah, I want to know about that. Most of the typical undergraduate activities we don't really want to see on your ARIS. Slows and letters matter. They used to matter a lot more, but we're only going to have one this year, so they're going to matter a little less. But once you do your rotation with your school, it's okay to ask the people who are writing your letter, can you give me an idea of how competitive I am and how many programs do you think I should apply to based on that? So that's a totally fair question. We've always advised our students based on our SLO, and then we used to review their other aways, and we would adjust the number of applications they went on based on that. We can't do that with the away SLOs this year, obviously, but you should be able to ask your SLO writer, hey, where are you putting me? Do you guys know what SLOs look like? I see some nods. So basically you're gonna get ranked top 10%, top third, middle third, lower third, both in how you did on your rotation and then where we think you're gonna go on the rank list, which where you're gonna go on the rank list will include other factors of your application. Or you might have done really stellar clinically, but you drove my residents nuts because you just didn't fit in personality wise. So I might give you top clinically, but middle on where you're gonna go on my rank list. So that's what the SLOs look like. So it's totally reasonable, and you should ask your letter writers that question. They should be able to answer that for you. So the last thing, let's just talk briefly about how this year is going to be different, and then we will start going through the questions in the chat and open it up for other questions. So away rotation restrictions. So you guys are all aware of this, but so are we. So CORD has come out, AMC has come out with, we really shouldn't be doing away rotations. Most schools aren't allowing it, except for if you don't have an EM rotation. So the biggest problems with this is it's going to limit you guys' ability to check out another program. If you go to a school that your EM rotation is in a community hospital, you don't get to go try county. County is very different. It's an important thing to try, and you guys don't get to try that. So what I would tell you is network. Networking is going to become really important. All those fourth years who matched last year that you kind of sort of knew or talked to once or twice, shoot them an email. Text them. Be like, hey, how do you like your program? How's it working out? What do you think about it? Maybe wait another month so that they're not 1 week into residency. But anyone you know, just ask them how it's going, what they like about it, what they don't like about it, so you can start getting a better idea of what's for you. Because usually I tell students, do a community, or an academic, and do a county as their rotations, but we don't have that option this year. So anyone you can think of, start reaching out, contact people to just ask them how they're liking things. Most students are going to only have one SLO. We know that. Program directors, our national group, has told us we only expect one SLO. So you shouldn't be trying to skirt around the rules to get a second group SLO. Don't worry about it. We know you're only going to have one group SLO. It's going to put a little more emphasis on other things, so your step scores, your honors, activities, and other data. But everyone's in the same boat, so don't worry about it. Non-SLO letters are also going to become a little bit more important. or non-group SLOs. So by that, I mean, it wasn't about a rotation, but it's written by an EM physician, and we can do SLOs for you. I would recommend you have them written by EM physicians. EM physicians have a better idea of whether or not you are going to fit well into our specialty. We have a better idea of what residency programs are looking for. So when possible, get your group SLO for your rotation, and then have 2 other EM physicians that know you relatively well, or that you had multiple shifts with, write your other SLO. If you have someone who is like a surgeon or some other specialty that you spent like a year doing research with, or you used to work for them and you're their research coordinator, that would be acceptable. If you know them really, really well, but don't ask a surgeon that you like did 2 weeks with on trauma. That's not going to serve you well. You're better off with an EM physician. The ways are also going to limit our recruiting ability. So again, I think one of the biggest things is the feeling people get when they come, especially for our program. We're a small program in Southern California. You know, we're not a huge name, but usually if people do AWAYS with us, they match with us because they really like, if we want them, they stay because they like it once they get there. So programs are going to look at alternative recruitment methods like this so that you guys can get to know us a little bit more. And more programs may choose to pick known entities. And I think students are probably going to do this too. So I know my students, I know that none of them have huge professionalism problems. They're going to do fine. I can mold them into perfectly great EM physicians. Random people, a little harder to get that figured out with a 30-minute Zoom interview. And that's going to be true for students too. You guys are going to know your home program. It's the place you got to spend 4 to 6 weeks on your rotation. It's safe, and that's okay. So you guys may choose to stay home because you know it. So I suspect there's going to be a lot of that this year. Virtual interviews, same thing. It's limiting you guys' ability to really get to know a program. Same thing, talk to your other classmates, talk to people, figure out where you're going to fit best through other means. It's gonna limit our ability to recruit. You guys should reach out to try to get the interviews too, right? So don't just reach out to talk to people and find out how they like the program, what they think about it. Also reach out to get a better idea, to be like, hey, I'm really interested in your program. Can you put a good word in with program director, please? Because it's a lot harder this year to choose who we're going to interview because there's not 2 SLOs. All the things that we used to depend on are gone. So one of my residents emailing me and being like, hey, I have a former classmate I really liked, cool guy, would fit here well. That's going to probably trigger an interview. So again, reach out to people you know and see if they can help you either get the interview or be raised up on the list after the fact. So networking, usually not as important. In COVID times, very, very important. One of the bright sides about virtual interviews is it's gonna be a lot cheaper for you guys. I mean, when I applied, I had to take out a loan. I took out a $10,000 loan to afford applications because I just didn't have any money. But the downside of this is some people may just go on all the interviews because they can. You know, it's only 4 hours. I can do 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. I really don't recommend that, both for everyone's sake. You guys are gonna get so sick of interviewing. It gets old. I hit 10 because when I applied, 10 was the magic number. And I literally fell asleep on a bus. They were doing a tour between different hospitals and I fell asleep on my interview day. I was just over it. I was tired. It gets old, you guys. So I really, even though you don't have to travel, I really don't recommend you guys do more than 17. And this is coming out from CORD, which is our national group. We are recommending you guys do 12 to 17 interviews. And I swear that will work. If you rank 12, you will match, with rare exception.
Programs might be doing a few more interviews, but I don't think many programs are going to dramatically increase the number of interview spots that they're doing. They're probably going to go up by 10 to 15%, maybe, but don't like Dr. Tui said, don't jump up to like 20 interviews. You're going to exhaust yourself. You're going to be so tired and it's just not worth it. The last few interviews that you end up doing, they don't end up being good for you because you're just not into it by that point in time.
Yeah, so pick the programs you're actually interested in, because it would also be a shame for you to put 5 that you're not really interested in there, that you would, you know, if you had to travel to them, you would have canceled before your favorite program at the end. And by then you're exhausted, you can't answer the questions anymore, and you just seem disinterested because you're going to eventually be disinterested. It's just human nature. You can only answer why I am so many times. So that's all I have for you guys. Let's see, what questions do we have? Looks like Elise has been answering lots of these already.
I've been trying to keep up and answer a good chunk of them. We will be recording these sessions. I'm not sure yet where we're planning to post them, but we are recording them. Dr. Tui, do you have a plan for posting?
Yes, it'll be on our website.
Fabulous. There was a question about the data for allopathic versus osteopathic students. I said that we tend to look at the whole application in emergency medicine. Emergency medicine really likes to look at the whole student. We're not really one of those specialties that narrows down into one specific thing. We like to see the whole picture, which I think is super important. And I think that applies very well to MDs and DOs. Let's see, sorry, just kind of trying to run through. If you guys have additional questions, feel free to jump out too.
Yeah, and so Lauren, the NMRP data, what they do for charting outcomes, they don't split out all the data that Sangeeta was talking to you guys about. They don't split it out for MD and DO, so I can't tell you how the averages differ for matched DO applicants versus MD. We really don't have that data because NMRP doesn't really give it to us as well. That said, most programs, we do try to look at the entire program like Elisa's application, like Elisa said. We do value steps a little bit more because it's harder for me to compare, it's harder for me to compare honors against all schools because some schools honor everyone and some schools honor nobody. So it gets hard, but it's a little harder for like clinical rotation information because DO clinical rotations are a bit different than MD clinical rotations. So the SLO becomes really important for DO students as well as what DO school it is, right? So again, that's where older DO schools probably have a little bit of edge over newer DO schools. And networking still gonna be really important. If you know someone there, contact them, see if they can talk, get in contact with the program director and talk you up.
There was a question about couples matching. I dropped a response in the chat. Everything kind of changes with couples matching. It really depends on what your significant other or best friend or whoever your couples matching with is going into. It depends on how competitive they are. It really honestly just depends. Typically those numbers go up. We recommend obviously applying to more programs. We recommend a few more interviews because you need to have more permutations when you're linking up your programs to really be able to make it to a good number to ensure that you match. We have a couple other questions coming into the chat now. Questions about like residency fairs for the SAEM residency fair, how we think students should make the most time at the residency fair. If they can't make it to a residency fair, what should they do? So Dr. Tui, what do you think about those?
So residency fairs, they're really more about you guys than they are about us. In 8 years of attending residency fairs, I think there's only 2 people that I was like so blown away by that I like sought out their application. So for the most part, it really is more for you guys to like chat with some of the residents, get to know them a little bit better. Very, very personable from the other end when I'm advising students. I've had a handful of very, very personable students who are not getting interviews get 10 plus interviews from attending like the ACEP residency fair. I don't know that's going to be true because it's virtual this year, so it's different. And also that is a person who literally used to be a rock star and his application was not strong, but his personality was. And he's the person who can like walk up to anyone and have like a phenomenal conversation. And 90% of us, myself included, are not that person. So for most of you guys, it's not going to make a difference. So if you can make a few of them, go just so you can get a feel of the program directors and how they are. But if you can't go, it's really not going to make or break your application. I mean, the nice thing is they're all virtual this year, so you don't have to travel. So SAEM's having one. There's regional ones, obviously, like Cal ACEP. EMRA's having the one that usually would be at ACEP. Does that cover that entire question, Lisa?
Yeah, that definitely did. There are also some questions about the OSLOs versus the SLOs. In regards to who they should ask to write an OSLO versus should they just go with emergency medicine SLOs. So I'll let you take that one as well.
Perfect. Really quickly, I just want to bounce back to the couples thing before I forget. There is a resource on EMRA. there's an EMRA student advise and CORD student advising guide. It has a chapter on on couples matching. So you guys may want to check that out, but like Elisa said, it's highly specific, so it's really something you need to talk to your advisor about, but there is a resource for that if you want to read about it. So OSLOs. So like I said, unless it's a physician that you worked with for like 6 months plus on some sort of project and they know you really well, I would avoid OSLOs. I would just get EM doctors to write your letters for you, because we're just more familiar with what EM programs are looking for. Surgeons don't always understand what I'm looking for. They're like, this great applicant would be great. And I'm like, no, they're not. They can't multitask. But they're great surgeons. They would have been a great surgeon. But they struggle on the EM world. So you're just better off sticking with EM physicians unless there's a non-EM physician who knows you phenomenally well.
So another question about virtual electives, and I started to answer it in the chat. There are a lot of programs that are coming out with virtual electives right now. Potentially, if they're done right, they offer the opportunity to really get to know a program. You really need to look at them though with a critical eye to see how much time you're getting with program leadership, how much time you're getting with faculty, how much time you're getting with residents, versus is it all just a bunch of online resources that you're going to be doing on your own and maybe only spending an hour or two with faculty. I think another thing to think about with the virtual electives is you need to check in with your home school of medicine, your home institution, to find out whether or not you're even going to be able to get credit for this, or if it's something you're going to be doing on top of something else you already have to do. So they have the potential to be cool, but I also worry that a lot of the ones that we're seeing out there just don't give you enough time and interaction with program leadership and with residents to really get to know a program. And a lot of them are honestly just looking like they're going to end up being a lot of busy work.
So to follow that up, there was a question asking if we will be offering a virtual elective this year. So we, because of those reasons that Dr. Ray was just talking about, we actually decided that we would rather do this webinar series rather than do a virtual elective, because of we felt like this would be a more useful format for you guys to be able to get to know us, instead of doing, like Dr. Ray was saying, online resources that you may or may not get some clinical knowledge. You may or may not get credit for it with your school, and you may or may not get much time with program leadership. But at least with this webinar series, whether you're able to participate on the day or if you're watching a recorded session, at least you get a little bit more interaction with the education leadership team.
And then the last thing would be the nice part about COVID, when everything's being virtual, so are conferences. So I wouldn't necessarily randomly email program directors being like, can I come to your conference before interview season? Just because so I get 1,000 applications every year. I can't respond to all those emails. Like, I try really hard, but I can't. So you're better off waiting till interview season. And once you've been invited somewhere for interview, even if you haven't interviewed there yet, be like, hey, I'd really like to get a better feel of your program. Can I attend your virtual conferences? Because most of us are stuck on virtual conferences right now. So we're only allowed to have simulation in person because it's hands-on. So we meet once a month, and otherwise we have to do virtual. We do play games and stuff. So if you want to come to our conference, you're going to get put in a small group with a bunch of residents and play a game, which is nice. You're going to get to know my residents and how crazy they are, but it might freak you out. So just beware. But you guys are welcome to come to ours. I would wait for interview season. And so if you're invited for interview, just contact them even before you interview and be like, hey, can I come to a couple conferences? And you don't have to stay the whole time. Be like, is there a time you think would be best for me to sit in so I can get a better feel of the program? And I think that's totally acceptable. We're all going to be really, really open to that. So I think attending a conference or two, or a couple portions of conference that they feel like not the lectures, something where you're going to get to interact with the residents, is going to be your best way to get a feel.
One other thing I forgot to mention from the clerkship standpoint, since we're not able to offer away electives for you guys to come and spend a month with us, as Dr. Tuohy was mentioning, we take a little bit of a different approach to didactics at UCI. There's a lot of gamification. Conferences are super fun. Compared to the conferences that I went through for residency, I mean, it's just night and day. These are really interactive. You get a lot out of it. And we've done a similar setup with the clerkship as well. So our didactic sessions with the clerkship, we're also going to set up dates. We haven't decided on dates yet, but I can email them out, and we'll also post them on our website of dates when we can do virtual didactics for students, for applicants who are interested in just seeing what our didactics were like for the clerkship, since you couldn't actually attend them. And so you're welcome to RSVP for that night as well once we set up the dates, which hopefully will be soon. and then participate in that. And same sort of thing, it's clinical games that you guys play, like escape boxes and choose your own adventure games. And it's a lot of clinical learning in small groups and in a virtual format.
So tomorrow for conference, we're actually doing a toxicology Jeopardy. We'll be breaking up into small groups on Zoom. We'll have one instructor for probably about 5 to 6 students. We'll run Jeopardy for about an hour and a half, going through the various questions and learning points and that sort of stuff.
So we do at least something like that every time, especially with virtual, because it's so hard to stay engaged virtually. So again, like once we start getting an interview season, you guys have invites, you really should just ask program director or clerkship director, or whoever you're comfortable contacting, when would be a good time for me to like jump in. Really quickly going back to the chat, Jason Wang, you asked about the number of SOAP spots increasing versus the decreased percentage of acceptance over the same period. So I think that's related to 2 things. One, the combination of what used to be DO programs versus ACGME programs all combining into one, and then 2, new programs. So there are quite a few EM programs that have popped up in the previous years. I'm fairly opinionated about these because most new ones are funded by contract medical groups, so CMGs. And CMGs are companies that trade your labor on the stock market. They pay EM physicians as little as possible and give all your proceeds to a bunch of rich people who had enough money to put money into Wall Street. And when that doesn't work anymore because of COVID, they all declare bankruptcy and start all over again, with no thought to the EM physicians who are actually doing the work, the patients who need to be treated, or the hospitals or communities. So I have very strong opinions about CMGs. So I actually generally recommend, so if you are a stronger applicant, I recommend you avoid programs that are run by CMGs. There are ways to look at who owns your hospital or who owns the EM group. If you have a red flag on your application, applying to a newer program or a program run by a CMG, like if there were tiers, that's going to be the only quote lower tier, because we do advise, most program directors advise other students stay away. In the end, you're going to be an EM physician. So if you have a red flag and you're concerned about matching, applying to those is a good idea. In the end, you're going to get ABEM certified, you're going to be able to get a job. You get what you want. I worry about the amount of money they put towards your education and the amount of time they put towards your education, because most of these are groups that already existed, that they were just like, hey, by the way, we're starting a residency, teach them, as opposed to an academic program where we came here because we want to teach. So again, you will still learn, there are plenty of patients, you will become a qualified emergency physician. I just don't think that you will have all the benefits that maybe an older program or a academic program might have. But if there were tiers, if there were safety programs, those would be the safety programs. So yes, to answer your question, Jason, that's what I would say.
Dr. Tui, there's another question about when reaching out to programs, who it's best to reach out to. Should they reach out to program coordinators or to program directors? How do you feel about this?
They're about equivalent. So what I usually tell students is go ahead and just email the program director and CC the coordinator. Because the program director is generally going to be who answers it, unless it's something like administrative, and then the director is going to be the one who answers it. The program coordinator may answer administrative questions, but sometimes programs have the coordinator like screen emails and remind the program director to answer certain ones. I usually try to answer any email that comes my way, but in the middle of interview season, when I'm literally getting like 25 a day, I get a little behind. But my coordinator will occasionally be like, hey, this one, you should probably make sure you took a look at it and answered. So I would just do it.
Oh, sorry. I think an important thing to remember when you're emailing out to people, everybody gets a lot of emails this time of year. Don't forget to be really patient and really kind in your emails. I know you guys are all incredibly kind people and good people, but a little bit of extra grace and a little bit of extra kindness is super important. Make sure if you're emailing a program director that you are not using a first name unless you've explicitly been told to use a first name. Make sure you use a doctor, so-and-so. If you're emailing a coordinator, make sure you're incredibly polite. Our coordinator is our lifeblood. She's ridiculously amazing, and make sure we're all on track and takes care of everyone. She's like our residency mom. So if somebody offends her or is overly aggressive on email with her, like we really take it to heart. She keeps us running. So just make sure when you send emails and with all interactions that you're super kind and good-hearted.
Be polite.
Yes.
She almost never tells me someone was rude to her, but usually like every year, like 2 people of the 80 we interviewed like did something really weird, and she'll point it out. And if you can't be nice to my like coordinator, who's the sweetest person ever, I get worried about how nice you're going to be to everyone else. And it looks like Elisa got most of the other questions here in the chat. Did we miss anything? Does anyone have any further questions? We got like 10 minutes left. What else you guys got? 3-year versus 4-year program. All right. So I'm biased. I am a program director at a 3-year program. I went to residency at a 3-year program. So what I usually tell people is no one knows. Go to wherever makes you happy. Like get a gist of how you feel at a place. And if you love a 4-year program, go to the 4-year program. If you loved a 3-year program, go to a 3-year program. If your fiance is going to be working near a 4-year program, go there. Like if your family's near the 3-year program, go there. The reason they exist, the reason 3 versus 4-year programs exist has to do with funding. So we're such a new specialty that when we were created, no one knew how long we should be. And as programs developed, half of them became a 1 + 3-year program back when you had to do a transitional year or a preliminary year, and the other half became a 3-year. And then as transitional programs disappeared amongst EM, there used to be 2 left, and I think they're all gone. Those ones that had transitional plus 3-year became 4-year programs, and the rest became 3-year programs. This went on for about 10 years, and then the government was like, why are we paying 2 different amounts? Oh, and why I say the government, I don't know if you guys know this, your residency spot is funded by Medicare. So most residency spots are actually paid for by the government, a good portion of it. Departments end up usually chipping into, or hospitals fund spots, but the majority of residency education is paid for by Medicare. So Medicare wanted to know why they were paying some people to become emergency physicians over 4 years and some people over 3 years. And they discussed it and they said, we're only paying for 3 years. So most programs switched to 3 years. The ones that remain are predominantly county programs that already don't depend on Medicare funding. They often depend on state or county funding to survive. So it doesn't matter. They don't care if that 4th year is paid for or not. And a 4th-year resident is very, very excellent, affordable labor. So they stick with it. There are some exceptions. Stanford added a 4th year that they call their like mini fellowship. That's great. Love Stanford. Love their program director. It's a great program. But for the most part, you're going to find 3-year programs are everyone else, and 4-year programs are counties. One is not better than the other. I just am not sure the 4th year is necessary. I know when my residents graduate and they have colleagues who are at 4-year programs, on July 1st, when my residents are starting their jobs, their friends are very upset about life. That they have 1 more year of residency and my residents get their first $16,000 a month paycheck. I suspect the ideal length of time would be 3.5 years, but it doesn't exist. The first year out is hard no matter what. The first year you are going to be terrified you're going to kill someone, whether you go to 3-year program or 4-year program. It won't matter. And what you're better off doing is picking a program that's really going to support you. I still have residents text me. I've had at least 3 graduates from this year text me this week on cases. They were like,
I got a call yesterday on shift.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's not
Can I run the station by you?
I've gotten calls at midnight from a resident that graduated a year or 2 ago at another program that saw that I was working. And so they called because they wanted to ask a question.
Yeah. So you're better off finding a place that's like going to be happy to still support you and help you through that first like transitional 6 months, regardless of whether it's 3 or 4. So I hope that answers the question.
What do you think, what current applicant values fit with UC Irvine?
So lots of things. We have a fairly diverse program. I will say we are a relatively married program. That's not to say we don't have single people, but we actually have a very high percentage of people who are married or have children. I don't know why that is. That's just kind of developed over time, because 10 years ago, it was a bunch of boys who partied all the time.
True story.
And something happened in 10 years. So now it's a bunch of, we're almost 50-50 male, female. And a lot of our residents are married and a good portion have children. But there's plenty of singles residents too. It's so hard to describe it. It's just people.
I feel like I almost think about like back when I was single and dating, people be like, well, what are you looking for? And I was like, well, I'm looking for what everybody's looking for, you know, a good person. So I feel like that's a similar approach when you're looking for potential residents, right? So we want people who, as Dr. Ray was saying, we want people who are kind and have a good heart. We want people who are hardworking. Personality fit, I think, is almost more important than what knowledge level you come in with, because everybody comes from a different medical school. People mostly get the same training in medical school, but there's going to be a little bit of variation depending on where you went, or, you know, how long it's been since your last clinical rotation. And so since fourth year can be so variable at different schools. So everybody comes into intern year day one with a clean slate, in my opinion. And I think Dr. Ray and Dr. Tuohy agree as far as knowledge base. We can teach you the knowledge base, but if you're a good personality fit for us, and for us, that just sort of means, like I said, being a good person, being fun to be around, really caring about your patients in a holistic fashion and not just thinking about them as a clinical process or disease. We are very much trying.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just because we're very much working on expanding in terms of diversity and being invested in our community. So we do care about social determinants of health, and we're implementing a new curriculum for that in the residency as well as the School of Medicine. So we want people to think about social factors or things outside of just the obvious clinical diagnosis for the patient. Those are just some of the things that come to mind when I think about the types of residents. And sense of humor is always good, because at 3 in the morning when you're on a really busy shift, it's nice to just be able to take a second and joke around with each other and enjoy working together. EM is tough and residency is tough no matter what specialty you go into. So being able to enjoy the people you're around is a huge part of getting through it together.
I feel like our residents run the line of being like super goofy and super nerdy, and then we have the ones that are very like come into work and work ridiculously hard and do amazing things, and then at the end of the day are like, and then we have the residents that like practically live at each other's houses even though they don't actually live together. Like you get a text message, I mean, we get text messages from them and it's like 4 of them sitting on a couch together having a beer after a shift, and they just want to like chat about a case. So I feel like we have like a very wide variety of personalities. There's like no one specific personality that's like 100% UCI.
Yeah. I think most of us are fairly relaxed though, and we're fairly informal. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think in general, there's probably a lot of cursing on shift. There's cursing on shift with us. But everyone's just kind of laid back. My residents, like they text us at 3 in the morning. We were about to go on retreat, and one of my residents texted me to inform me that the lazy river at the hotel was closed and we needed to change immediately.
Yeah.
And I told her that was not possible, but I was very sorry about the lazy river.
And the subsequent text was a picture of their shopping cart at Costco, because they wanted us to know that they were bringing snacks and other refreshments.
So we're a pretty informal group. And you're gonna hear this from a lot of residencies. They like to say like, oh, we're a family. It's a very common thing. It's become very cliche. But we really are, for better or worse. Everyone's gonna know your business. And it's out of love, because it's easier if everyone knows you're going through divorce. They're going to be a lot more relaxed if you're like struggling on shift and you're not keeping up with patient volumes, et cetera, et cetera. Like everyone just knows. When I had a shooting when I was driving to work, someone shot at me. By the next morning, all 27 residents had texted me at some point. They're not even on the same rotation. I don't even know how they all found out, but every single one of them had texted me by 8 hours later. And so same thing with like anything going on in the personal lives of the residents. Like everyone just kind of knows everything about everyone else. So you kind of have to be okay with that. It's not mean gossip. It's just, we're small enough that that's what happens.
So I got married this past fall, and I would have loved to invite the residents, but I couldn't afford to invite the residents as well as the rest of the guest list that we had. But the residents knew that it was happening, and they informed me that they were going to show up, invited or not, to the reception.
I'm
And so
shocked they didn't.
I'm shocked that they did. Well, I actually expected them to, and I told the coordinator and I told the people at the hotel, like I gave them a list of names and I said, these people are not on the guest list, but if they show up, let them in. They didn't, but that's the type of program. It really is, like Dr. Judy was saying, lots of people will say it's like a big happy family. I think I heard that at every single program I interviewed at on the interview trail, but UCI is where I have felt it more than anywhere else.
So I think that, Akash, I think that addresses your question, Macy. Giving different regions, if you're at med school in one region and you want to go to residency in a different region, showing interest. It used to be you went and did an away in that rotation, not possible right now. So that's where those emails are, like an email even before interview season. So don't do it now, because I don't remember you now, you get lost. So wait till ARIS. The ARIS timeline's slightly off. You guys should have all that information. We can't even look at your stuff until October 21st. Usually interviews went out in like mid-October, but now they're not going to go out probably till early November. So probably after, like right before the first round of interviews, so late October or right after the first round of interviews go out, like early November, shoot an email to programs that are in a region you're really interested in and just explain why. You know, my family's in the area, fiance's moving there, whatever your reasoning is. And that's your best bet on kind of reaching out to those programs. All right, anything else we can answer for you guys? All righty.
Well, and do you want to put up the dates for the next sessions? That way everybody can take a screenshot if they want to. So there you go. The next one will be July 13th, 6 to 7:30. We'll be talking about why UCI, but primarily it will be our residents and our alumni and everyone else. I dropped my email in the beginning of the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We'll post this up on our website. That way you can review it if you have other questions.
Perfect. And we'll be putting this on YouTube, and then it'll end up on our EM residency webpage. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy your night.
Have a good one.